to understand them. All right, the first story is A Pair of Silk Stockings by Kate Chopin. And here is the introductory little information, right? American writer Kate Chopin, or Chopin, however you say it, wrote the short story A Pair of Silk Stockings in April of 1896. It's been a while, right? The story was published in 1897. Chopin is known for writing stories about women who live in the late 19th century and their roles in society. This story takes place over a single day. A young mother wanders through town with some unexpected extra money in hand. Finding $15 then would be like finding $200 or more now. She spends the extra funds on herself rather than on her family as she had originally planned. Okay, so you can picture this. This is from over 100 years ago. Picture it in your mind and use your imagination. And let's make a movie in our heads. Little Miss Summers one day found herself the unexpected possessor of $15. It seemed to her a very large amount of money, and the way in which it stuffed and bulged her worn old purse gave her a feeling of importance such as she had not enjoyed for years. The question of investment was one that occupied her greatly. For a day or two, she walked about apparently in a dreamy state, but really absorbed in speculation and calculation. She did not wish to act hastily, to do anything she might afterward regret. But it was during the still hours of the night, when she lay awake revolving plans in her mind, that she seemed to see her way clearly toward a proper and judicious use of the money. $1 or two should be added to the price usually paid for Janie's shoes, which would ensure their lasting much longer than they usually did. She would buy so and so many yards of fabric for new shirts for the boys and Janie and Mag. She had intended to make the old ones do by skillfully patching. Mag should have another gown. She had seen some beautiful patterns, veritable bargains in the shop windows, and still there would be left enough for new stockings, 2 pairs apiece. And what darning that would save for a while. She would get caps for the boys and sailor hats for the girls. The vision of her children looking fresh and dainty and new for once in their lives excited her and made her restless and wakeful with anticipation. The neighbors sometimes talked of certain better days that little Miss Summers had known before she had ever thought of being Mrs. Summers. She herself did not think about the old days. She had no time, no second of time to devote to the past. The needs of the present absorbed her every thought. A vision of the future, like some dim, gaunt monster, sometimes appalled her, but luckily, tomorrow never comes. Mrs. Summers was one who knew the value of bargains. She could stand for hours making her way inch by inch toward the desired object that was selling below cost. She could elbow her way if need be. She had learned to clutch a piece of goods and hold it and stick to it with persistence and determination until her turn came to be served, no matter when it came. But that day, she was a little faint and tired. She had eaten a light lunch. No. When she came to think of it, between getting the children fed and the place righted and preparing herself for the shopping trip, she had actually forgotten to eat any lunch at all. She sat herself upon a revolving stool before the counter that was comparatively empty, trying to gather strength and courage to start her shopping. A limp feeling had come over her, and she rested her hand aimlessly upon the counter. She wore no gloves. By degrees, she grew aware that her hand had encountered something very soothing, very pleasant to touch. She looked down to see that her hand lay upon a pile of silk stockings. A sign nearby announced that they had been reduced in price from $2.50 to $1.98, and a young girl who stood behind the counter asked her if she wished to examine their line of silk hosiery. She smiled, just as if she had been asked to inspect a tiara of diamonds with the ultimate view of purchasing it. But she went on feeling the soft, sheeny, luxurious things with both hands now, holding them up to see them glisten and to feel them glide serpent-like through her fingers. 2 red blotches suddenly came into her pale cheeks, She looked up at the girl. Do you think there are any eighths and a half among these? There were any number of eighths and a half. In fact, there were more of that size than any other. Here was a light blue pair. There was some lavender, some all black, and various shades of tan and gray. Mrs. Summers selected a black pair and looked at them very long and closely. She pretended to be examining their texture, which the clerk assured her was excellent. $1.98, she mused aloud. Well, I'll take this pair. She handed the girl a $5 bill and waited for her change and for her parcel. What a very small parcel it was. It seemed lost in the depth of her shabby old purse. Mrs. Summers, after that, did not move in the direction of the bargain counter. She took the elevator, which carried her to an upper floor, into the region of the ladies' waiting rooms. Here, in a corner, she exchanged her cotton stockings for the new silk ones, which she had just bought. She was not reasoning with herself, nor was she trying to explain to her satisfaction the motive of her action. She was not thinking at all. She seemed, for the first time, to be taking a rest from that hard and fatiguing function, and to have abandoned herself to some mechanical impulse that directed her action and freed her of responsibility. How good was the touch of the raw silk to her flesh! She felt like lying back in the cushioned chair and reveling for a while in the luxury of it. She did for a little while. Then she replaced her shoes, rolled the cotton stockings together, and thrust them into her bag. After doing this, she crossed straight over to the shoe department and took her seat to be fitted. She was fastidious. The clerk could not make her happy. He could not match her shoes with her stockings, and she was not too easily pleased. She held back her skirts and turned her feet one way and her head another way as she glanced down at the polished, pointed-tipped boots. Her foot and ankle looked very pretty. She could not understand that they belonged to her and were a part of herself. She wanted an excellent and stylish fit, she told the young fellow who served her, and she didn't mind the difference of $1 or $2 more in the price, so long as she got what she desired. Now we're going to summarize. With $13 left, she forgets all her plans to carefully spend it all on her family. She feels young, free, and enjoys being waited on, as perhaps she did before she was married with children, and focuses entirely on herself. First, she goes to the shoe section and sits while an attendant helps her try on and buy a pair of beautiful shoes. Secondly, she goes to the glove counter and an attendant helps her pick out a pair of fine gloves. With $13 left, she forgets all her plans to carefully spend it all on her family. She feels young, free, and enjoys being waited on, as perhaps she did before she was married with children, and focuses instead entirely on herself. With $13 left, she forgets all her plans to carefully spend it all on her family. She feels young, free, and enjoys being waited on, as perhaps she did before she was married with children, and focuses instead entirely on herself. First, she does finally buy a pair of beautiful shoes. Secondly, she goes to the glove counter. An attendant helps her pick out a pair of fine gloves. Then goes to a fancy restaurant and has a light lunch and tips the waiter, feeling as if she belongs with these other people who have money to spend. Finally, she buys a ticket to see a play and goes to the theater, enjoys the show and being with other people who can afford such luxuries. Then, the play was over. The music ceased. The crowd filed out. It was like a dream ended. People scattered in all directions. Mrs. Summers went to the corner and waited for the cable car. A man with keen eyes who sat opposite to her seemed to think she had a pretty face. He wondered what he saw in her expression. In truth, he saw nothing, unless he were wizard enough to detect a poignant wish, a powerful longing, that the cable car would never stop anywhere, but go on and on with her forever. Sometimes self care is selfish, and that's okay. Written by Jamie Elmer, updated on July 1st, 2020. Self care, we hear it all the time now, or more accurately, seeing it on Instagram as skincare products, fizzy bath bombs, yoga poses, acai bowls, and more. But self care is more than what's commercialized on our social media feeds. Self care started as a way to physically take care of yourself. It then evolved into caring for your emotional well being, and even more so, the overall health for women, people of color, and more marginalized communities. Then why are we still feeling like self care is selfish? Maybe you've just called off dinner, declined an invite where your ex will be, or even just said no to anything. This might leave you feeling a little selfish or guilty. It doesn't matter that you're emotionally and physically exhausted or that your mental health is suffering. You might lie awake in bed thinking about how you should have done something different or been better in some way. Saying no feels like a failure, like you're incompetent or unequipped to handle day to day life. But if staying in helps you prioritize yourself and your own energy and healing, are you really being selfish? Redefining what it actually means to be selfish. When the word selfish comes to mind, it often sparks negative connotations at first. We think self centered, self serving, self involved, and we're supposed to avoid thinking only me and my interests, right? To instead try to live for the good of all humankind, since giving is taught as preferential to taking. Even though it's defined as being concerned with only our own personal pleasure and profit, as well as lacking consideration for others, we still think of selfish as the times when we're simply putting ourselves first. But we can't see it in black and white. For instance, we're told we need to adjust our own oxygen mask before helping others in a plane emergency, or to make sure the scene is safe for you before helping anyone who's hurt. No one would call us selfish for following those instructions. Just like all things, there's a spectrum. Sometimes the right thing is to be selfish. And just because someone defines something you've done as selfish, like, like opting out of their party, doesn't mean you have to define it on their terms. So, repeat after me: I won't beat myself up for being selfish. Sometimes being selfish isn't a bad thing. There are times when being selfish is the right thing to do for your health and well being. These are also times when taking care of yourself is necessary. Here are some of those times. One, you need help. Everyone needs help from time to time, but we often avoid seeking it. Whether we acknowledge it or not, sometimes asking for help can make you feel incompetent, weak, or needy, even if not asking for help means adding unnecessary stress. But asking for help when you need it is important. If the stress of a work project is getting to you, ask a coworker for assistance or delegate tasks. If you need companionship, ask a friend for support. If you need an unbiased outside voice, seek therapy. Two, you need rest. When you're feeling tired, it doesn't matter if it's emotionally, mentally, or physically, it's time to rest. Sometimes that just comes down to sleep. There are a number of consequences to not getting enough sleep, including trouble focusing, a weakened immune system, and memory issues. Skipping too much sleep can even have a negative impact on your relationships, but we often feel like we have to keep going. Sometimes sleep isn't at the top of our priorities, but the fact is we need rest. If you've been working late and skipping sleep, it's time to find some work life balance. And the next time you choose to go home and sleep instead of grabbing drinks with friends, that's okay. If that's called selfish, it's the kind you want to be. Resting doesn't always mean sleeping either. Whether your brain is feeling off balance or you have a health condition flare up, consider it a sick day and take the time off. And don't feel obligated to do the laundry since you're at home. Read a book in bed, binge watch a show, or take a nap. If you're feeling fatigued, exhausted, or in pain, it's time to get some extra rest and not feel guilty about it. Rest is essential to any type of recovery. 3, you just need alone time. Some people might not get it when you choose staying home over going out. If that's what you're in the mood to do, don't feel selfish for wanting to be alone. We all need alone time sometimes, and some people need more than others. Social interactions can be exhausting for some people. There's no shame in taking time for yourself. If you've been going nonstop, your mood is all out of whack, or you need to reevaluate your relationships. May be a good time to plan some alone time. You don't need to fill your calendar with social events unless you want to. Run a bath, unplug, and have that me time you're craving. 4, it's time to end a relationship, job, or living situation. It's never easy breaking up with a significant other, moving to a new city, or quitting a job. If you feel bad when you interact with someone or dread encountering them again, it's time to rethink your relationship. We often stay in friendships or relationships because we're scared of hurting someone. But when it comes to relationships that are damaging, sometimes you need to put yourself first. It's not self sustaining to continue a relationship or job or anything, especially one that's in any way abusive. That no longer makes you happy. If something is giving, if something is affecting your well being, it might be time to say goodbye. 5, give is being significantly outweighed by take. Although it can fluctuate, any relationship should have a good balance of give and take. But when the scales tip so that all you're doing is giving and all they're doing is taking, it might be time to do something. The balance of give and take is especially important when living with someone. Do you find yourself doing all the errands and chores when you get home from work while they come home and put their feet up? It's important to have balance to both avoid resentment and fatigue. Depending on the situation, you may choose to talk to them, take a short break to recharge, or cut them out completely. It's not selfish to prioritize your own needs over others if the act of giving is causing you more harm. 6, to avoid burnout after work or in your personal life. Everyone is susceptible to burnout or work exhaustion. Certain professions can be exceptionally draining. When burnout occurs, it can hurt both your professional and personal life. One study even points out that for mental health professionals, it could be ethically imperative to practice self care. So when clocking out time comes, truly clock out. Turn off your work notifications, snooze your email, and deal with it tomorrow. Most of the time, whatever it is can be handled just as well tomorrow instead of in the middle of dinner. No matter what you do, make sure you have time to separate yourself from work. Creating this work life balance can help you avoid burnout and bring more happiness to your personal life. Take care of yourself. Don't neglect yourself and your health to avoid feeling selfish. Selfishness doesn't have to be a bad thing. It can be good to be a little selfish, to take care of your emotional, mental, and physical well being. Many people who focus entirely on give, give, give end up overwhelmed, fatigued, and stressed. And chronic stress has been linked to a number of health risks, including conditions like diabetes, cancer, and mental illnesses. You can reduce your stress by being a little selfish now and then and practicing some good old self care. Here are some ways to start self care tonight. Try out some relaxing yoga poses. Practice mindfulness. Get outside. Take a bath. Make some soothing tea. Get better sleep. Practice a hobby like gardening, crafting, or baking. Whatever you do, remember to take care of yourself. And don't forget, it's never selfish to do so. All right, you can pause the video now. Go into the second question. What nonfiction characteristics and text features stand out the most to you and why? Explain. Remember, those are all listed for you here if you need reminders. And what's the overall summary of the article? Doesn't have to be very long, just a few sentences. And these summaries help you remember for testing tomorrow. All right, let's go back to the poem. We have to go back up. The Albatross by Kate Bass. You want to imagine a woman, right? Not Mr. Carbajal. Imagine a woman speaking these lines. When I know you are coming home, I put on this necklace, glass beads on a silken thread, a blue that used to match my eyes. I like to think I am remembering you. I like to think you don't forget. The necklace lies heavy on my skin. It clatters when I reach down to lift my screaming child. I swing her, roll her in my arms until she forgets. The beads glitter in the flicker of a TV set as I sit her on my lap and wish away the afternoon. I wait until I hear a gate latch lift, the turn of key and lock. I sit amongst toys and unwashed clothes. I sit and she fingers the beads until you speak, in a voice that no longer seems familiar, only strange. I turn as our child tugs at the string. I hear a snap and a sound like falling rain. That's a happy little poem, isn't it? Right, I'm being sarcastic. All right, let's read it again. The Albatross by Kate Bass. I know when you were coming home, I put on this necklace, glass beads on a silken thread, a blue that used to match my eyes. I like to think I am remembering you. I like to think you don't forget. The necklace lies heavy on my skin. It clatters when I reach down to lift my screaming child. I swing her, roll her in my arms until she forgets. The beads glitter in the flicker of a TV set as I sit her on my lap and wish away the afternoon. I wait until I hear a gate latch lift, the turn of key and lock. I sit amongst toys and unwashed clothes. I sit and she fingers the beads until you speak, in a voice that no longer seems familiar, only strange. I turn as our child tugs at the string. I hear a snap and a sound like falling rain. All right, so for this poem, what are the poetry characteristics that stand out the most to you and why? Explain. Remember, look down here for poetry characteristics. And then, what is the thematic topic? What theme is this poem about?